category as chickenpox and smallpox. How deadly is monkeypox?
First and foremost, thank you for having me here. I wish I were here on a better note, but again, we're faced with another epidemic just after the Lassa fever epidemic. It is known that monkeypox is not exactly as deadly as some of the other epidemics we've seen in recent times.
Okay.
Usually, between 1 to 10% of people who are infected with monkeypox will eventually die. Most of them will die primarily
not feel good. That doesn't mean that things
the
cannot be fine.
complications of having monkeypox is not properly managed, or they don't have, quick access to healthcare and all of that. Yeah.
Okay. So in the case whereby it's detected quickly and managed, what's the duration?
Yes. So even without treatment, monkeypox after a period of about 3 to 4 weeks will clear on its own. So it's a self-limiting disease.
Okay.
Yes. But even if treatment is started, it makes the 3 to 4 weeks a bit more bearable for the individual.
Okay.
And I'm sure, I think it's also important to know that children are more prone to dying from monkeypox than adults.
Okay, now let's take a look at the signs and symptoms for people who might want to, because I'm very sure the symptoms might be similar with some other, fevers and all of that. So let's look at the signs and symptoms so that people can look out for it.
Again, I'm very sorry that I don't have very good news there, because this is again one of those viral infections that looks pretty much like malaria. So you would see fever, you see nausea, feeling of unwell. Someone says, I just don't feel well. You could see cough, and those are the common things that you see. And in this environment, especially now that we're in the rainy season, it's those are very common symptoms. Someone says, oh, I feel like I have a fever, I'm coughing.
So it's just everywhere. One might not easily get to know it's something different.
Right.
All right. Now, what are the risk factors? Earlier, you mentioned that children are more susceptible to this monkeypox.
Right.
So who else, and what are the risk factors? What can lead one to contacting it in the first place?
So for monkeypox, the primary route of transmission it's called a zoonotic disease. So transmission occurs from animals to human beings.
Okay.
So people will keep pets, squirrels, rats again. And monkeys, they stand the risk. I know in the US it was dogs, it was from dogs. So even among animals, it moves from animals to animals. So
not just monkeys.
Yeah, it's not just monkeys. And let's not be misled by the name monkeypox. Yes, because actually it's less. For most of the cases that have happened in West and Central Africa, you find monkeys, but more often you find other animals.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now,
particularly, just to mention, particularly animals that are sick or dead. So
dead.
Yes.
Okay. So it's wrong for people to eat dead animals.
Never. You should never. Remember that for Ebola, it's also a risk factor. Sick or dead animals, is a no-no.
With the level of poverty in Nigeria, people might just, we have areas in some rural areas where people want to, the animal just died, let's kill it and eat.
Right.
How do we really reduce that? Is it awareness now? How do we get to handle that as a
Yes, so we need to get the message out there. We need to let people know that, you can decide to go hungry and stay alive, or eat something, be happy, and then stand the risk of dying. That message needs to go out, particularly to the rural areas, and we need to be able to educate people and so on, and hopefully with that. And then again, I know in some places there's a strong advocacy for not moving animals, across borders. So say moving animals from particularly mammals from, say like Nigeria to some other country. Yes, because there was an outbreak in the US, I think either in the 70s or the 80s, and it was suspected to have been from animals, animal to animal contact, and the primary animals were from, this part of the world.
Okay. Now we hear that there are no vaccines available for monkeypox, but we know that this is not the first time it has happened in Nigeria. This is not the first occurrence, and we hear that there are no vaccines. How true is this?
Yeah, that's very true. You also note that this is the third time that we're having an outbreak of monkeypox in Nigeria. The first outbreak was in 1971. Okay. Second outbreak was in 1978, and in those two outbreaks we had a total of 3 people. So it was never really on the radar of the Ministry of Health, because just 3 people. So far, this is the worst outbreak of monkeypox. I heard that we have about 13 people who have been, minimum of 13 people who have been infected. So it's never really been on our radar. It's definitely not in the class of the meningitis, the Lassa fevers, the Ebolas, and so on.
But then again, we don't have to wait until there are lots of cases before we take action at this.
I totally agree with you, and that is where we should have. I know in some other places they're able to prepare vaccines around these kinds of things in a very short time, because they have places where they store these viruses, so that if there's an outbreak, they just take a sample of the virus to the lab. Yes, so
as in developed.
Yes, in developed. And interestingly, we have an agency of government that really should be doing that. I forget their name now.
The disease control.
So the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. Well, they look at epidemics, but there is I think it's called the Veterinary Research Institute.
Okay.
So they produce vaccines. They do a lot of research around vaccines, and they should be able to help us in times like this and produce things.
Now, as a matter of fact, the state governments of these states, Bayelsa states basically, and Cross River State, and the federal government has also told Nigerians that the situation is under control. There's nothing to worry about. Is that really true? Is there really nothing to worry about?
Yes, I totally agree with them.
Okay.
Especially if you wash your hands. Again, we're back to washing of hands. And for healthcare professionals, if they practice what we call universal precaution.
Okay.
And universal precaution basically is a patient comes in, has fever. There are certain basic things you must do. You should wear gloves. You should always have your ward coat on. You should wear scrubs. And as much as possible, avoid taking your scrubs or your lab coat back home, because it could have some kind of infection on it, and then avoid body fluids, coming in contact with any form of body fluid. If you do that, you need to wash your hands and do all the basic things that you need to do. If that was in place, I tell you that the speed with which this epidemic has broken out would have been
limited. Okay, now what's the for human contact? What's the possibility? How fast can it be contacted from another human, like from a human who has it already? How fast can it be contacted?
It's a virus. Once you come in contact, with the body fluid, some people have even just to let you know, not so much is really known about monkeypox, because it's not like high up there in the class of the Lassas and so on. So not so much is known about the specifics of how it is transmitted, especially in this environment. Some people will tell you that it can be transmitted through aerosol droplets. So someone coughs or someone sneezes, you can spread it that way, which makes sense, because those actually have droplets of body fluid in that. So but primary thing is from animals. It can be gotten by eating animals that are infected and not properly cooked, And then from person to person, it can be through body contact and contact with body fluid.
Okay, so basically, what do Nigerians need to know aside from washing your hands regularly, like you pointed out earlier?
So the first thing I would like to let Nigerians know is there is no cause for alarm. Everyone should relax. We're not all gonna die soon. So, so people should relax.
Okay.
Key thing to note is you need to wash your hands. You need to, maintain a very clean environment. If you cannot properly maintain pets, and when I say properly maintain pets, you don't have a vet doctor for your pets. You don't immunize them frequently. Please,
keep them at all.
Don't bother keeping them because they can serve as reservoirs of this infection.
Right.
And then very importantly, to the healthcare community, doctors, nurses out there, universal precaution is more important than ever. I mean, if you're a doctor out there, I'm a doctor. So let me speak to you as colleagues, nurses out there. Please, universal precautions are very, very important. Your ward coat, your uniforms, your scrubs, gloves, face mask, goggles. Those things are very important. As you must have noticed, we're having a series of epidemics, one after the other, and all of them seem to have, fever in common.